Good morning to all. I am Dr. N.G.P in the Department of Computer Science, and my course name is Object-Oriented Analysis and Design, and my topic is Object Basics. In this video, we will see the introduction about the object basics, object-oriented concepts, then object relationships and associations, static and dynamic binding, then meta classes. Introduction. So the object-oriented approaches attempts to build models that mimic the real world. So in the object-oriented programming languages, everything will be depend on objects. Based on the objects only, we have to perform all the operations. So in many systems, we want to build involved things that exhibit behavior as well as the structure, and also exhibit the time dependent aspects. So the three things, the behavior, structure and the time dependent aspects, everything will be possible, everything will be done. These aspects will be possible to done through the object-oriented approaches. So through this only we have to perform all these three things, that is the behavior, structure and the time-dependent aspects of programming languages. Okay. So the model will be defined as the functional model, object model, dynamic model. In this, the functional model will depict the behavior of a particular languages, particular program, particular problem. Then the object model will define the structure of a particular program. Then dynamic model will exhibit the temporal aspects of a particular program. So this object orientation will be introduced in the year of 1970. So the languages, what are the languages we use the object oriented concepts means the Simula, Smalltalk, FL, C++ and Java. So in this, the Java is a pure object oriented programming languages when compared to C++. In C++ is a extension of C, so this is not a pure object oriented programming languages. So in this, the Java is a pure object oriented programming languages. So initially they created the object oriented concepts for the programming languages only. After that they designed the object oriented analysis, design techniques, tools and databases and the development. These are all the extension of these object oriented concepts. So object orientation attempts to unify many aspects of the system analysis and design processes that were disparate before. So in this object orientation concept, so the main important thing, important property of using the object orientation is the reusability. So here we include the concept as the inheritance. So inheritance concept is introduced in the object orientation. So using the inheritance property, there is no need to write the same coding once again. So this will reduces our time for creating our program. So this is the main important concept of the object oriented program, object oriented concepts. So object orienters has also argued to be more natural approaches. So these are all the concepts, object oriented concepts. So many concepts are there. These 10 things are the important one. So the first one is object and classes. The second one is attributes and methods. Then concept of messages, encapsulation, information hiding, aggregation, object relationship and association, polymorphism, class hierarchy. These are all the 10 basic object oriented concepts. Okay, let's see one by one. The first thing is objects and classes. So you already know the object. What do you mean by object? Objects are the basic runtime entities. Through these objects only we have to perform all the programming problems. Okay, so informally an object represents an entity. Either the entity may be represented as a physical entity, conceptual entity, software entity. We maybe represent the entity as any type. Okay, so objects are the basic runtime entities. Here this diagram will shows the this core diagram is represented as a class. Inside the classes we have to create an object for that particular class. So for a single class it is possible to create more than one number of objects. So in object oriented system everything is an object. Classes are used to distinguish one type of objects from the another. For example, if a class A created 5 objects means, so the class A having the first objects as X, the second objects as Y, third object as Z means it may be deferred, it may be classified as A dot X, A dot Y, A dot Z. Okay, so classes are used to distinguish one type of objects from the another type. So what do you mean by class? Means class is a set of objects that share a common structure and common behavior. That is the combination of classes, the combination of objects and methods into a single unit is called as a class. So inside the classes we have to define the objects and methods, attributes, everything will be defined inside the class. So the binding of all the things is called as a class. So the object means a single object is simply an instance of a class. So object is an instance of a classes. So a class is a specification of structure. So specification of structure, that is called as an instance variables. Then behavior we call it as an methods, and inheritance for the objects. So everything will be placed inside the class. Classes are an important mechanism for classifying objects. So the main role of the class is used to define its properties. So the main work of our class is to define our work, define our applications. So through the attributes, through the methods only we have to define our properties. Here the example as a car, we have to create a class as a car. In this car class we define the property as color. Okay, we take a single property as color. So the color may be anything, maroon, red, blue, black, anything may be defined for that particular property. So the value for that particular property color is maroon, red, blue, black. Okay, so in an object oriented system a method or behavior of an object is defined by its class. So each object is an instance of a class. So this is the first property, that is the objects and the classes. So objects are the basic runtime entities and the classes are used to combine the attributes and methods objects into a single binding into a single unit is called as a classes. Okay. The second concept, object oriented concept is attributes and methods. So objects can be described by its properties and methods. So here the example as class name as a cat. Inside the class name we have to define the four methods as color, food preferences, size and weight. These are all the 4 methods what we have to use for a cat class. Okay, then the attributes what we have to use for that particular cat class is catch, mouse, eat, meow. These are all the attributes what we have to use for the particular class cat. Okay, so there is a difference between the methods and the attributes. Through the using these attributes we have to perform the operations through the methods inside the class. This is called as the attributes and methods. So object behavior is described in methods and procedure. So what do you mean by the method? Method is a procedure that we have to define for a particular class and it is used to perform some internal operations through the objects. Through the object will call that particular method. The method will be called. Inside the method we have to perform some operations. So the operations or things an object does or can have done to it. So in the object model all the data are stored in the attributes of some objects. So that in that attributes may be defined for a depending on the particular object the attributes will be changed. Okay. So the next concept is messages. So for a single class, it is possible to create more than one number of objects. So it is possible to send the messages from one object to the another object. That is called as messages. Send information from one object to the another object. So objects interact with each other by sending and receiving messages. Through the messages only, the objects will be interact with each other. So messages are similar to procedure calls in traditional programming languages. Objects perform operations in response to messages. So the previous example we saw core example. In this core example, we send a messages as to stop the message. If we send the messages and if we want to stop that particular message, then we have to send the messages as stop. Okay. Through this way, we have to interact. We have to send the information between one object to the another object. The next concept is encapsulation and information hiding. So what do you mean by information hiding? So we have to hide some information from the external things. That is called as an information hiding. This can be applied possible for using the access specifiers. So many access specifiers are there: public, private, protected. So through using these access specifier, we have to hide our data, protect our data from the external things. So information hiding is the principle of concealing the internal data and procedures of an object and providing an interfaces to each object in such a way to reveal as little as possible about its inner workings. So this is called as an information hiding. Encapsulation means to binding up of data and methods into a single unit is called as an encapsulation. Okay. The next one is object relationship and association. So association represents the relationship between the objects and classes. So inside the classes, we can create more than one number of objects. So how that particular class and object will be related, that type of relationship is called as an association. So this association may be represented in both the ways, from left to right and right to left in bidirectional method, traversed in the both the directions. So in this association, there is one type of issue is present in there, that is called as cardinality. Cardinality means how many instances of one class may related to a single instance of an associated class. That is called as a cardinality. The next one is aggregation. Aggregation means all objects except the most basic ones are composed of and many contain other objects. So aggregations where an attribute can be an object itself. So sometimes we create here the example will show the example for that particular aggregation. A car object is an aggregation of engine, seat, wheels and other objects. So breaking down objects into the objects from which they are composed is called as a decomposition. It is possible to divide our objects into so many literals. Okay, that's called as an aggregation. The next one is object relationship and association. Already told you that relationship is the association represents the relationship between the objects and classes. So that relationship is called as an association. Here one example is pilot and planes. So the pilot can play on the planes flown by the pilot. Okay, it will be traversing the both the direction, from left to right and right to left. That is called as a relationship between the objects and the classes. Okay, the next topic is static and dynamic binding. You already know that static and dynamic binding. Static means at the compile time, if we perform any operation is called as a static. At the runtime, if we perform any operation is called as a dynamic. So if we combine our classes and methods at the compile time itself is called as a static binding. If we perform that operations at the runtime is called as a dynamic binding. So determining which functions has to be involved at the compile time is called as a static binding. So static binding optimized the calls as function function called. So the process of determining at runtime which functions to involve in terms is called as a dynamic binding. So dynamic binding occurs when polymorphic calls is issued. It allows some method invocation decisions to be deferred until the information is known. The next one is object persistence. The persistence means the lifetime of a particular object. If we create an object X means what is the lifetime of that particular object X? That will be defined as the object persistence. So they are explicitly created and can exist for a period of a time, certain period of time. That is the 10 second, 20 second. Within that particular 10 seconds, the particular object's lifetime will be expired. That's called as an object persistence. The last one is meta classes. Meta classes means a class inside a particular class is called as meta classes. So in an object oriented system, everything is an object. So what about a class? So is class an object? Yes, class is also an object. So if it is an object, an object means it must belongs to a particular class. If that particular class is treated as an object means that particular object, that particular class will be belongs to another class. So we call it as a meta class. A class inside a class is called as a meta classes. So that's all about the object basics. Thank you.